So, with all that being out of the way, let's get into the first of three topics that I wanted to discuss in today's podcast episode. And the first of which, I think I said them out of order in my initial intro, but the first thing that I wanted to talk about, sort of in conjunction with The Little Mermaid, which opened up a few weeks ago and I got a chance to see, is the Disney live-action remake. So, for those of you who have been sort of keeping up with Disney and the movies that they've been making, you'll know that they really have shifted their focus over the past 10 or so years to remaking a lot of their beloved animated classics. Now, this has been done to varying levels of success, both critically and financially. And it's so much so that even a couple of them, I believe Peter Pan and Wendy recently, and then when Disney Plus first launched in 2019, Lady and the Tramp had a live action remake, which was interesting. But all that to say is that, the level of success and acceptance from the audiences and from the critics has been mixed, and really has not, been met with the resounding success that I think Disney wants them to have, them being the live action remakes. And so, in watching The Little Mermaid, one thing that crossed my mind a couple times is sort of thinking about what the point of these live action remakes are, whether or not they're worth continuing, and what they might mean moving forward for Disney. And so, the first thing that I wanted to talk about really is why Disney is remaking basically their entire animated library. So I don't remember what the first one was that they did. You could go back, I think, to maybe Alice in Wonderland, although I'm not sure that was entirely a remake in the most traditional of senses. But, you've had your Cinderellas, you've had your Jungle Books, and Beauty and the Beasts, and then Maleficent as well. I feel like that was sort of the first wave. And then since then, you've had your Aladdins, your Dumbos, Lion Kings, Mulans, and this year, obviously, the Little Mermaid. And so, I mean, the first thing that strikes me is that, this is a more cynical look on the whole thing, but it's something that I think is really driving the whole. I think there are two ways to look at it, is what I'll say. So the first is obviously a little bit more cynical, and it's profit, it's money, right? Because yes, these IP, these properties are very recognizable. Obviously, the entirety of Disney is really built upon the animation renaissance that took place in the 90s. You go to Disneyland, for example, and obviously before Marvel and Star Wars, it was all sort of built upon the Disney, quote unquote, Disney princess era of Disney animation. And so, I think it's a very surefire way to at least make some money. And whether or not these movies are making money to the extent that Disney wants them to, a la, for example, Mulan, although Mulan obviously came out during the pandemic, on Disney Plus, or even The Little Mermaid, which doesn't look like it's going to make an incredible amount of profit, even though it looks like it might profit a little bit. I think goes to show that you can then have films like Aladdin and The Lion King, which both made over $1 billion, and those really, I think those seem to justify or maybe even outweigh these other films that aren't making as much money. So the first thing, obviously, is recognizability. Parents know these properties, children know these properties, because they've probably been watching the animated ones, and the parents might have nostalgia for them. They might want to introduce their kids to these, and Disney knows that, and Disney knows that these films are going to make money. I mean, you throw out a movie like, and this is sort of the cynic's argument, right? I'll get more into what I believe is a more hopeful and optimistic viewpoint about this. But the cynic's argument is that why would we want to put out an original movie like, say, I don't know, I like a Frozen, for example, which is a bad example because Frozen became instantly popular. But for example, like, an original movie when we could just remake our entire catalog. Okay. Fine. So there's that. I think the other side of that coin is something that maybe speaks a little bit more towards my own situation, because like I've said many times on this YouTube channel, one of the first videos I did, by the way, was a Pixar movies tier list. And one of the first things that I've said on this YouTube channel is that I didn't grow up a Disney animation kid. I really did not. I grew up a Pixar kid, so Pixar was really the animation that I grew up watching, and because of that, this might shock some of you. I never grew up watching a lot of the animation from Disney proper. And so while I probably had seen most of these movies once when I was really young, they never ever had a lasting impression on me. And the flip side to this whole capitalist profit driven argument is that these live action remakes are a way to reintroduce a new audience to Disney's sort of brand. I mean, let's be honest, right? It's not like it's really not like these characters are sort of just one. I mean, you could argue that with Marvel and Star Wars, they are now just sort of one part of Disney's brand. But let's be honest, when kids think of Disney, they don't think of Star Wars, they don't think of Marvel, they think of Aladdin and Mulan and Beauty and the Beast. And I think that this, in a way, is one way to reintroduce their library to a new generation with updated visual effects and all that kind of stuff. And to be honest with you, when these live action remakes work, they work for somebody like me who has really no attachment or memory of these original films. And I understand that based on a lot of reviews that I've seen that, it's upsetting when a movie, a live action remake gets it really wrong, because it just feels, I don't know, hopeless that why would you even do this in the first place when you have a movie like Pinocchio and then you make this weird live action Pinocchio movie that nobody seemed to like. And I think that that's an argument that I definitely understand, but it's not one that resonates with me personally, because for me, when I see a Disney live action remake that really does resonate with me, I really enjoy it, and it's like it's being introduced to me for the first time. Obviously, I know the general the general story brushstrokes of Beauty and the Beast or Aladdin or The Little Mermaid, but when these live action remakes work, and I'm gonna say that for instance, The Jungle Book is my favorite live action remake that Disney has done. I love Jon Favreau's The Jungle Book, and it's because it introduces me to a story that I wasn't entirely familiar with. And let's be honest, the original Jungle Book, at least in my opinion, the way that it was done and animated and things like that, I'm sure it's wonderful for a great many people, but for me, it's just sort of an old animated Disney film that I really had no interest in watching. And so now seeing it updated and seeing it brought to quote unquote live action with all those CGI animals, but whatever, is a way to reintroduce Disney's library. So you have sort of these two sides of the coin. That being said, even though I am more sympathetic to the argument that, I think that there is some value to be had from these Disney live action remakes, and I'm willing to hope that it's not entirely profit driven, although obviously everything in Hollywood is entirely profit driven, if we're being honest. But I also think that this is a little bit worrying to me, because we're nearing the end, I think, of all of the big live action Disney remakes that you can make. And what it's going to do is it's going to force Disney to really reevaluate what kind of content they can make. And I mean, look, it's one thing to say, yes, look at Aladdin. I really like the live action Aladdin. I really do like the live action Aladdin. And I enjoyed The Little Mermaid quite a bit as well. But what we could have been having instead of those, properties is we could have been having more original content. And let's be honest, right? That's how Disney thrived in the first place. I know that a lot of the Disney Disney animated content in the 90s was based on existing, fairy tales and things like that. Obviously something like The Little Mermaid or the Lion King sort of being based on Hamlet and things like that. But that being said, it's when originality strikes is when Disney can continue to expand itself. So I used the example of Frozen a little bit ago, but you have something like a Frozen, which I think is an incredibly successful franchise because Disney was able to capitalize on an original idea. I think that something like The Incredibles, when that first came out, I think Pixar was, in its heyday, incredibly good at capitalizing on new ideas, new innovative ideas, and then letting them marinate for however much time that they would allow for. So, for example, while Toy Story did have 2 sequels, and I'm talking about just sort of the first sort of big phase of Pixar. Obviously, I think we moved into the next chapter with Toy Story 4s and whatnot. I think that there was still sort of like things to explore within that property. Then you had your Monsters Inc. and you had your your Incredibles, your Ratatouilles, your Wallies, and I think that originality really sparks great properties, great new stories that you can then expand upon. You have Frozen 2, you will have a Frozen 3. You had Toy Story 1, you have 2, 3, and I guess you have 4 and 5 now that 5's coming out. I guess you have Inside Out 2, and we'll see how that goes. My point here, I guess, and I know I've been rambling on for a little bit now, and I apologize, but I wanted to make the point that while I don't think there's anything inherently harmful to remaking the Disney animation into live action, I also think that it's robbing us a little bit. It's depriving us of the originality that made Disney so special in the first place. And it's sort of dulling Disney's magical effect, if you will. Because yes, I'm watching The Little Mermaid for the first time, and it's for the first time as in being reintroduced to The Little Mermaid because I remember the story and all that kind of stuff from the animation, but it just wasn't as familiar to me. But it dawns on me that it still feels a little bit bland, not because of the movie itself, but because I feel like we've been here and done that before. And while I'm very happy to have, the live action Aladdin film because I really like it. And I'm very happy to have the live action Jungle Book because I really like it. It just feels like Disney is stalling and stagnating a little bit. And we'll talk about Marvel in just a second. But one of the things that I think would really benefit Disney as it goes through a little bit of a period of turmoil with almost all of its franchises, frankly, Pixar, Star Wars, Disney Animation, Marvel, I think it could use that spark again. And so I hope that once this sort of wave is done, we can say, okay, that was fun. We got some good movies out of that. We also got some not so good movies out of that. Let's move on and let's try something new. And I'm really hoping that even live action Disney can make some really great films as well. Okay. And by the way, this also extends to remaking or making films based on their rides. Like that's cool, I think, to an extent, but also isn't it even cooler that you make, your own original film and then you base a ride off of that? I feel like that's that much better. But anyways, I'm just here for more innovative original content, and I hope that Disney can deliver that.